Let's go, let's go, let's go. UFC London is just a couple of days away. And boy, oh boy, what a card we have in store. A host of UK talent is going to be fighting on Saturday night. And a host of talent is joining me here tonight for the UFC preview show. But before we get into the nitty gritty, I wanted to remind you of our sponsors, All Real Nutrition Bars. Head on over to eatallreal.com. Grab yourself the most delicious protein bars on the market. Enter the code word SevereMMA and get yourself 15% off. And that's enough of that. Let's talk some fights. We're in for a big one tonight. I'm so excited for this card. I'm absolutely buzzing. I'm delighted that you all could join me today. We're going to get straight into it, but in relative terms of UK MMA and UK MMA history, I'd like to bring in Brad first. I mean, for me, looking at from the outside in, and me looking at this card, it just feels like a super big card, huge event. Brad, you've been a part of some big major UK events. You've seen some big UK events. How big does this one feel to you on Saturday night?
You know, it feels huge. And I think part of that is to do with obviously the talent on the card. And part of it is to do with the fact that there's been no UFC here for 3 years now. You know, I was really lucky last time the UFC were in London. I got to commentate cage side for the BBC. And it was just such a special night for combat sports, you know. Molly McCann getting big wins. So obviously, you know, didn't end particularly well with Till getting finished, but there was just something in the air that night, and it just felt like the golden era of UK MMA. You know, it felt like all the chickens had kind of come home to roost. You know, all the hard work that's been going on in the sport in recent years was starting to pay off. So for everything to be taken away from us for 3 years now, it's just sucked really hard. But this card is, for my money, even better than the one we got 3 years ago in London. It highlights so much talent that we've seen coming up through the UK circuit. Hey, I'm a Cage Warriors guy. I'm glad to see all the Cage Warriors vets on the card. I think it'd be looking very different if we took all those guys out. But yeah, it just feels like a great time for UK MMA. Of course, Cage Warriors Friday night as well. It's a big fight weekend in London. I know the Bisping documentary's just been released, and there's been screenings of that going on this week. It feels like a really good place for the sport now. The domestic circuit's back, and you know, seeing guys over these past few months, amateur guys coming up, I'm thinking, man, 3 years time, these UFC London cards are going to be looking even sicker.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's always an air of excitement around, even for us over in Ireland or me in Canada, because we followed these guys through Cage Warriors and followed their career paths, and it just feels that little bit extra special, certainly to me, and I'm sure the rest of the guys would agree as well. Spencer, for you, how does it feel for you looking somewhat from the outside in? Obviously, you've followed some career trajectories here now, but do you get the same satisfaction, same excitement as everybody else here?
I mean, I don't think it's probably on the same level as it is for you guys, and especially for fans over there. I'm probably a different case because I, pay attention to this stuff as ravenously as I do and track these people and speak to folks like you and follow folks like you guys that let me know who these people are coming up. But just from having been over there myself a few different times, a few different places, having watched all of the London shows, you can feel the energy of that crowd. You can feel the energy of these UK shows whenever they take place right through the screen. And so the minute they announced that they were going back to London, I started to get hyped. And then as they started revealing who all the fights were going to be and who all is competing this weekend, that excitement just grows. And I think anybody that is truly a fan of this sport, regardless of whether you know deep histories on all of the people competing, it's the crowd and the energy of these events that you just thrive off of and you just feed off of. And I think that's going to be even greater this weekend because, as Brad said, it's been 3 years. The last one ended in such dramatic fashion with the knockout and then the 3-piece and soda in the back. And so there's just this, it just feels so different right now. It feels so exciting. It feels electric to me. And I cannot wait for Saturday morning to get here.
Indeed. I mean, the crowd is one thing, the atmosphere in the arena is the next, but we have a talent-rich card coming in, and a host of UK fighters from top to bottom, and we'll start at the very top. We'll start with the main event, Tom Aspinall versus Alexander Volkov. I mean, really great fight here, in my opinion. A big step up and a true calling for Tom Aspinall coming in here in what will be his biggest fight, his first UFC main event. And, you know, it's a pretty difficult opponent too, Harry, isn't it, for Tom? And a step up in competition from Sergey Spivak.
So I certainly think it's a step up in competition. I think that Sergey Spivak is a good European level fighter, and that's no disrespect to him. We saw against Greg Hardy that, you know, at the end of the day, if you can't grapple and somebody else can, it's going to be a very quick night. I think what we saw against Spivak, though, is sort of the well-roundedness and the intelligence of Tom Aspinall. If we go back and look at the finish, Aspinall has a collar tie, and he lands a knee to the body to bring the elbow down and to bring the chin down. So Sergey Spivak is essentially covering his own ribs. And as he's doing that, Aspinall used that knee as a fake to land the right hand, and then we know what happened after that, right? I think with Volkov, the thing that's going to be really interesting is how is he going to be able to drag Aspinall late? In the Garn fight, there was a number of times where Garn used his speed and his footwork, something that Aspinall also has in different strokes, to get inside, and he was head to chest a number of times. If that situation happens for Volkov, we're going to find out just how good his takedown defense is in open cage and how well he can defend takedowns going up against the fence. But the thing that Volkov has is, how many fights has he got? 50? 30, 34 and 9 losses? So yeah, nearly 50 fights, right? There are some veteran savvy and there's some veteran tricks that Volkov will have that Aspinall has never seen before. The range, the cardio, the patience, the pacing, the shot selection, all of those things are going to be really, really interesting when Aspinall gets locked in there.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be super interesting. I mean, Brad, you've seen Tom Aspinall somewhat, you know, he had a spell in MMA, went off boxing, kind of made his career resurgence through Cage Warriors again, and now he's on the big show again here. You think, is he a type of a guy, in your opinion, that loves this occasion and will cherish this occasion and make the most of this occasion?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've been calling Tom's fights since he was an amateur. He fought many times on FCC up in Bolton. That was kind of a home show for him for a while. And, you know, you just see the dedication that this guy's got to the sport. You know, he's grown up in a fighting family. You know, he's got a lot of relatives who are into martial arts. Of course, his old man was one of the preeminent, one of the first UK BJJ black belts. When you grow up in that environment, when you're spending your time after school in the gym, chucking blokes around, doing jiu-jitsu instead of playing video games, you know, you grow up with that reverence for combat sports. And that's certainly what he's got. You know, he never got the chance to be Cage Warriors champion because, to be completely frank, you couldn't get guys to fight him. You know, there just isn't a whole lot of heavyweight MMA in the UK and even Europe. You know, Cage Warriors flew 2 different guys in to fight him. And you know, if you're a 250-pound guy and you're super athletic, chances are you're going to be in the UFC pretty quick anyway. And obviously that's where Tom's ended up now. And, you know, he seems to have taken to the position of being a headliner like a duck to water. You know, he doesn't seem uncomfortable. He doesn't seem nervous. And, you know, I kind of thought that Arnold Allen would get the nod for being the main event for this one. But just seeing how Tom's taken to it, I definitely think that he can be a figurehead for UK mixed martial arts in the UFC. Indeed.
Spencer, how do you think that Volkov can spoil the party here for the UK public and for the fans in attendance?
Well, before I answer, I'm going to apologize for the occasional chainsaw you may hear in the background. My neighbors are choosing to do some home renovations this fine Wednesday afternoon here in Abbotsford. The thing with Volkov, and I spoke to both of these guys this afternoon, actually, and he just said it's all about experience, right? Tom hasn't been in a fight like this against a guy like me with my range, with the skills that I bring to the table. And Harry mentioned it a little earlier, right? There is that veteran savvy that comes from having 42, 43 fights. He's gigantic in terms of his size and his range and those things. And those are all pieces that Tom's going to have to work with. And if you watched his media session today, Tom said, I've been going with guys that are his size for a number of years, right? And obviously we know he's boxed with Tyson Fury, who is 6'9" himself, big long reach, all of those things, but that's just different. And so it's a different thing that he's going to have to deal with. And I think Volkov can rely on the fact that he's done 5 rounds. This is his 6th UFC main event, I believe, headlined some in Bellator and elsewhere as well. So this isn't anything new. He's made this walk. He's headlined in London before and got a very good win. So he understands everything that's before him on Saturday. Tom doesn't, and that's going to be a piece of this. The thing that's interesting to me or crucial to this fight to me is that Tom knows all of that. He understands all of that. And maybe better than any first-time headliner I can remember in recent memory, he's prepared for it all in terms of just taking it in. He feels like a different mindset in terms of his approach to all of this stuff. And I think that's going to be a difference maker on the weekend as well.
For sure. I mean, I was speaking with Sean Sheehan about this fight, and, he asked me the question, is it too much too soon for Tom? And it was the kind of, I gave the answer, like, maybe come back and ask me again on Sunday. I'll be able to tell you that. Like, I mean, we're going to find out a lot of things about Tom Aspinall here. And Andy, maybe I'll jump over to you. Do you think it's too much too soon? Do you think it's the right move? My counter argument to that question was, you know what? Even if it is too much too soon, Tom can get back on the bike. He can go again. He'll be able to mount another challenge. So, like, I think personally myself, it's the right time to make this fight for Tom. And, if things doesn't go his way, he can always get back there. But on the other end of the stick, there's still a lot of unanswered questions that we will know when this fight is over. What's your thoughts on this, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting one in my opinion in that, he beat Sergey Spivak and he's leapfrogged himself into the rankings, and now he's taken on what is he, number 5, number 6 guy. It is a bit of a jump, but at the same time, what I've been most impressed about with Tom Aspinall since I started watching him is his adaptability in the cage. He seems to be so fluid in how he can transition from whether it's the striking to the grappling to the clinch. He just seems so comfortable everywhere, and he always seems to have an answer when he's posed with a question. So when it was a case where he was piling it on against Andrei Arlovski and he didn't get the finish, and then Arlovski towards the end of the round he started coming back and he was landing some really good shots on Aspinall, for Aspinall to then immediately just say, all right, I'm just going to go take him down and choke him out. And then similarly, as Harry was talking about at the start of this with the Sergey Spivak fight, where just that the cheeky nature of, throwing that knee to the body and then immediately so quickly coming over the top. I think that Tom is just so well-rounded where, as Brad was saying, he grew up with jiu-jitsu. That was his base, but when you look at him, you wouldn't think that was his primary, martial art growing up. You would think that he comes from a striking background just because he's so quick and he's able to change a fight and dictate where it takes place so easily. And I know that that Volkov will present him with challenges that he hasn't faced yet. And I know that a lot of the talk has been about Volkov's size, but I think we also forget Tom Aspinall's 6'5", Volkov's 6'7". So he is bigger, but it's only 2 inches. So I don't think the size will play as much of a factor as maybe, people talk about. And I would be confident in Aspinall's ability here. And as you said, even if he does lose this fight, he's still so young in his career. The whole reason why he's fighting Volkov right now is because he just keeps putting away everyone. He has to make this jump. So he's talking about, I'm going to fight for another 10 years. He's got plenty of time left. So I'm very, very interested to see how he deals with this challenge. And even if he doesn't come out successful, there'll be another fight right around the corner for him.
Sean, Denny, obviously the current situation with the war and everything that was going on, there was a question mark over whether Volkov would be able to travel. Would he make this card? He did. He talked about his travel time today. He had to go travel for nearly 24 hours straight. You think with the current situation that's going on, disrupted plans perhaps, do you think that it will take it from Volkov's performance, or do you think that he's just too experienced and seen and done it all, like Spencer has said previously?
I think there's 2 benefits that he has, that he didn't go when they wanted to rush him into London. So he ended up finishing his camp as planned in Russia with his team. And And yes, the flight over would have been a massive pain because you have to probably go through Istanbul or Dubai or somewhere to connect into London. But he's a heavyweight, so he doesn't have to cut the weight. So I'd say the seats didn't help him because he's a big lad, but I think he can get through this relatively unscathed. So I think we're going to see the best Volkov in here. A little bit crankier, I'd say, after those seats. But yeah, no, I don't think these preparations have gone too badly for him. I think it would have been worse had he made the decision to come to London earlier and maybe not finished out his camp. But yeah, he should be all clear here.
100%. And yeah, that kind of rounds it up for the main event. I'll just do a quick whip around for the main event and just get a very, very quick opinion on how the fight might go. And we'll start with Brad.
Well, look, what I want to say first of all is that I hate Volkov because a few years ago he cost me a lot of money. I don't gamble pretty much ever, but every now and again I'll just put a stupid accumulator on like an entire card. And it was the fucking Derek Lewis fight where he was winning the fight and then got knocked out. I was sat there beaming like a Cheshire cat, and my girlfriend was like, "What are you looking so pleased for?" I was like, "I'm going to win about $4,000 here," and then boom, down he goes. So yeah, for my money, I see it ending a similar way for him on Saturday night. I think Tom Aspinall is going to knock him out in the 3rd round.
Mr. Spencer Kite.
Yeah, I think this is a win for Aspinall. I mean, talking to him today, he's in just such the frame of mind that he has right now is so great. Like, we've all seen that he's sort of run out of, and Brad talked about, he ran out of people to fight at Cage Warriors, which was essentially why he came to the UFC. He's kind of at a point now where this is it, right? Like, you have to test yourself against these guys, and he can either do it later or he could do it now in London. He doesn't know how any of it's going to go, but the part he won't say is, but I'm pretty sure I know how it's going to go. He knows he's world class. We're going to see that on Saturday.
Sean, Denny, over to you. How do you see it going, man?
Yeah, I think Volkov, I can't see a way of him getting the finish. And I think if you give Tom Aspinall 25 minutes, he'll find a way to get the job done. I'm saying a 4th round submission.
Interesting. Andy?
Yeah, I'm going to follow suit and pick Aspinall. I think he's, a la Cyril Gane, he's a new breed of heavyweight. He's quick, he's light in his feet. And I just think that he has all the tools to beat Volkov, to be honest, in whatever area the fight goes to. I don't know how he gets it done, but I think he'll get the job done inside the distance.
Mr. Harry Powell.
So I'm going to take Aspinall. I think that's obvious. I think the grappling probably gets it done. But there are a few question marks that I would like to see Aspinall answer. In the Arlovsky fight particularly, when Arlovsky rushed him, Aspinall was trying the Izzy fadeaway, but his chin was very high and his hands were very low. And against somebody of Volkov's stature and range, you don't want to get caught on the end of the chin with one of those shots as they're coming in and as they're storming in. I think the other thing is pacing. And can he's been very fast out of the gate, and those fast twitch muscle fibers are always on show. But I would like to see him take him a couple of rounds. I'd like to see Volkov test him a little bit, push him a little bit. But look, if I'm putting a bet on, I think he subs him inside 2 rounds. I just think that those massive legs, when you tie them together in one big tree stump, they're going to fall over. And when they fall over, it's going to be very, very tough for Volkov. So I'm going to take Aspinall via sub inside 2 rounds.
Nice. I kind of agree with all you guys. I think that Tom Aspinall is an extremely exceptional talent, and I can't wait to see his progression through the heavyweight ranks. I think Volkov will prove difficult at times for him until he finds his range against the bigger guy. I feel we might see a little bit both what you guys were saying. I think he might hurt him on the feet first and then either win by TKO or go for that submission. And I ultimately can't see it going further than 3 rounds, max 4 rounds. So an excellent fight, a great fight that I can't wait for, which brings us to an absolutely utter phenomenal fight. A fight that could have been a main event on its own, right? I mean, Arnold Allen versus Dan Hooker. I mean, I'm getting even goosebumps talking about this fight now. I just can't wait for it to happen. I mean, it's Dan Hooker's first fight back down in featherweight for many, many years. He started his UFC career there before moving up. He spoke today about, this being the original plan as such for him to kind of start at lightweight, move down to featherweight, except he had to take his chance at featherweight back in the day. Now that he's gone up to lightweight, he's got much more experience. He feels more comfortable moving back down in the weight. He feels that he's garnered the skills. And Spencer, I'm going to ask you to speak about Dan Hooker and your opinion of him as a fighter coming into this fight, and what is his chances against someone like Arnold Allen?
I mean, I think everybody will agree that Dan Hooker is quality. We know that. We've seen that, especially through this lightweight run. I think there were some people, probably myself included, during that first featherweight time where he was inconsistent and kind of losing to some better fighters. Yair Rodriguez, I remember, was at that fight at 192 in Houston. But we've seen over this progression to lightweight that as he's started to work consistently with Eugene Behrman and the crew at City, his skill is just advanced. All those kind of raw tools that he had have been honed down to where he has proven himself to be a top 10 caliber lightweight. And we all know what that means. What I'm interested in here, as I think all of us are, is what does Dan Hooker look like now that he goes back down to 45 with all of those tools in place, with that experience, with that confidence from having been in the cage with some of the best 55s in the world, having beaten some of the best 55s in the world, to face a guy like Arnold Allen, who I think we all agree is incredibly talented, undefeated in the UFC, probably should be a bigger star than he is, but hasn't faced someone of Dan's level just quite yet.
Indeed. And, we'll move over to Brad, and I just want to get Brad's opinion on Arnold Allen overall, his level of skills. How would you compare his skill level and his talent to other stars and other fighters that we've seen come out of the UK in the past, Brad?
I genuinely think he's one of the most underrated guys on the UFC roster. He's not a big trash talker. He's an incredibly funny guy. If you've ever had the chance to speak to him, he's an absolute riot. You can see he's kind of coming out of his shell a little bit in terms of his social media these days and doing his meal deal reviews, etc. And that's going to help him in terms of how he's perceived as a star. But in terms of talent, man, he's always had it. He used to train at my local gym when I lived in Cambridge. He was training out of Tsunami Gym, as well as BKK. Those two gyms were sort of very well connected. And I remember going to see him years and years ago at UFC MMA. He was on the undercard fighting Nathan Grayson, the former Cage Warriors flyweight champion, at flyweight. And I think Arnold was like 17 at the time. So if you can imagine Arnold at 125 pounds, man, it was incredible. And he just plucked Grayson out of the air with a big overhand right after surviving a torrid first round. And you're like, yeah, man, this kid's got something special. And I think we've seen that as he's progressed, through Cage Warriors onto the UFC. The performances are just getting a little bit more mature every time. Everything's coming together. And he's an experienced guy. He's 20 fights nearly as a pro. If you add his amateur contests in there as well, you're probably looking at somewhere in the region of 30 contests. And again, from a fighting family, he's got it all. He's a very, very talented guy. And like I say, for my money, one of the most underrated on the UFC roster right now in terms of the top tier guys.
Yeah, I definitely would have to agree with that. I would go as far as to say, obviously a fighter in progression right now, but definitely one of the best talents to ever come out of the UK, in my opinion, where it comes to overall game, all-round game. Solid striking, solid grappling, solid wrestling, over at a good camp in TriStar. Harry, talk to me about the nitty-gritty points of this fight. How do you see these guys matching up with one another?
So my question mark for this fight, Brad and Spencer have both touched on them, so I'm going to steal those words and shoehorn them into my explanation. The first one is maturity and the second one is refinement. Right? You can argue both guys are pretty mature in their fighting experiences, but I think in the refinement of their styles, they're worlds apart. Right? Dan Hooker very rarely makes mistakes on the feet. Everything's tight, everything's crisp. His elbows are always to his sides. Whereas Arnold Allen, he is much. I don't want to use the term messy in a negative context, because it's not that. He's messy in the sense that he's trying to take your head off with every shot, right? And the way that he blends that style together is very fluid. He goes from overhand rights, immediately ducking into clinch situations and pushing people back. Something that's at the backbone of his game is his just insane, inhuman strength, right? I'm a sucker for watching those YouTube videos where him and his dad powerlift in the gym, and the weight that fella can lift for a man. I've spent some time at TriStar and I saw Arnold Allen, and when you look at him, you're not like, oh, that fella can lift 200 kilos, but he can, right? And you saw that in the Sadiq Youssef fight specifically, where when he gets a hold of Sadiq Youssef just doesn't have anywhere to go because the squeeze and the power is so prominent. We saw it in the individual shots that he landed in that fight. I think that the question mark here is Arnold Allen is, for me, a far more well-rounded fighter than Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker, however, has a specialism, and that specialism is striking, specifically from the range that he feels he's happy to dictate from. If I'm Arnold Allen, I'm asking for grappling. I'm asking for grappling. I'm asking for open cage grappling. I'm asking for grappling full stop. If I'm Dan Hooker, I'm asking for absolutely the opposite. If Arnold comes in with big swings, we catch him. Dan Hooker's frame, the length of his legs, the length of his arms, sit really nicely into overhand rights, overhand lefts coming in, the switch stance jab that Arnold uses. We're looking at inside shots as he comes in. But I would agree with everything that Brad and Spencer have said about the maturity and the well-roundedness of Arnold Allen. And I would love to see him use that, really show that, because people are certainly sleeping on Arnold Allen for the reasons that everyone's already spoken about. But if we see him go in there and put a flawless performance on, or a near flawless performance on, against somebody like Dan Hooker, we're off to the races.
Indeed, like talking about sleeping on Arnold Allen, a win here would make it 9 wins in the UFC, I believe. He's undefeated in maybe 10 or 11 as well. He was undefeated a few fights before he came into the UFC. When I see Arnold Allen, and Brad mentioned it as well, a man of few words, not that outspoken, quietly confident. I think of someone like Leon Edwards, who's in the same boat, very, very talented fighter, and someone who doesn't get the respect that he deserves for his skills, and someone who kind of suffers from his lack of personality a bit. And Andy, maybe I'll go to you. Does it seem that way with you? Do you think it might hinder him, or does he just claim his title shot, claim his run at a title by just going out here and obliterating Dan Hooker, which is going to be no easy feat? That being said,
it's a really funny one, because I find that some of the personalities in the sport who are deemed, not entertaining, boring, not much personality to them, are often some of the ones where if you scratch the surface, they actually have some of the most interesting and affable personalities going, and I think Arnold Allen is one of those. Like, once you get to know him, or the likes when he's doing, I saw PT Carroll and MMA and Point guys doing that, reviewing the meal deals with him, and you're just like, I just want to watch this guy all day. Or to what Harry was saying, the videos of him weightlifting with his dad and constantly throwing his family members under the bus at press conferences and this type of stuff. He's really, really interesting, and I think it's a little bit different than Leon. I think, to put it bluntly, I think the Brummie accent kind of goes against him a bit, because it's just for people maybe in America or overseas, it might be a little bit hard to understand him. But I think that Arnold Allen, I think they both have interesting personalities once you actually kind of listen to them speak. But I don't think that'll hinder him at all. I think that Arnold Allen is, if he wins here, is one fight away from a title shot, in my opinion. I think this elevates him to the top 3, top 4, to getting that big fight against, say, a Korean Zombie or a Brian Ortega or someone like that. I don't think it'll go against him at all. I think it is, just before you said it, that's all I could think of was Leon Edwards, because the long fights, the long fight streak of wins, and just not that much hype around him. But at the same time, it's like, well, this guy could definitely challenge for a title in the future. So very interested to see how this one plays out, and I think a win can really elevate him.
I tend to agree there. I think one way how you counteract being maybe mild-mannered or not being outspoken is you go in there, you put on the performances inside the cage and just become undeniable. And we'll do a quick whip around and we'll start with Sean Denny on how he thinks the fight might go and who he thinks is going to win.
Arnold Allen decision. I agree with Andy. I think next fight should be Korean Zombie. Last man to beat Allen was the Polish Zombie. So I think he's going to avenge the Zombie family and they get a title shot. Arnold Allen decision.
Spencer, your opinion, please.
Yeah, I think similar. I think as Harry said, this should be grapple, and then grapple some more for Arnold Allen. Just get inside, put Dan Hooker on the ground, not to draw comparisons to Islam Makhachev, but, put him on the canvas. It neutralizes most of those weapons and just give yourself the best opportunity. I don't know that he finishes him. Dan Hooker is hell to put away, but I think it's grapple from the start through the end, 9 straight wins. And as they say all the time, if winning 9 straight in the UFC was easy, more people would do it. So give Arnold Allen his due.
100%. Brad, how do you see the fight going down, man?
Yeah, I agree with everyone else. But, I think you have to, when you look at a guy like Dan Hooker's record and, a very, very experienced guy, been in the UFC a long time, and you see, look, he's lost 3 of his last 4. But then you look at who he's lost to, and this guy is losing to elite level fighters. Islam, Chandler, Dustin Poirier, these guys are no mugs. He's not going out there losing fights to, middle of the pack guys. He isn't a truly elite level fighter. Maybe the best fights that Arnold Allen's fought to this stage. So I think Arnold's going to win. I think it's going to be a decision, and I think he's going to have to fight for every one of those 15 minutes to earn it.
Indeed. I mean, myself and Harry were talking about it before we went live, and Harry was suggesting, Arnold Allen might fancy his chances on the feet. I think he'd be foolish if he was to try and stand and bang with Dan Hooker here. I think Dan Hooker, especially for the first half of this fight, the first 7.5 minutes, I think he's going to be at his most dangerous. How Arnold Allen counteracts that is he gets close, he gets Dan working with the grappling, trying to take him down, get those arms tired, set a pace. It's Dan's first cut down to 145 in a lot of years. So, and then maybe, as the fight goes on, if he feels that Dan is maybe weakening a little bit or not as explosive on the feet, then maybe you could try your hand a bit of striking. But I think the route forward for Arnold Allen is get the grappling, try to get the fight down. I can see him winning the decision by doing that. Harry, I'll get your quick thoughts, and then I'll go to Andy for his quick thoughts before we move along.
Sure. So I'll keep it very concise. I think Arnold Allen will win. I think it's going to be a closer fight than people are thinking it's going to be. I think Brad summed it up really well. Arnold Allen is going to absolutely have to fight tooth and nail for everything he does in that cage. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Arnold bounces back from the injuries he's recently had. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Dan Hooker deals with the weight cut.
Andy, your final thoughts.
I think we see a classic Dan Hooker war a la the Paul Felder and Dustin Poirier fights. I think that Arnold Allen just edges a decision, but I'm not overly confident.
Indeed. Okay, let's move along to probably a guy who is more than likely going to steal the show. I know that he has kind of stolen a lot of the news and the lead up to this fight after his bust up with Ilia Topuria today, and that's Paddy Pimblett. And I have to go to you first, Brad. I mean, you've been there for some special nights at the Echo. You've had a front seat really for the majority of Paddy's career, and there's been talks of this fight. There's been talks of Paddy competing for the UFC at a big UFC London card for many years. There were talks of it back in 2013, 2014, 15. It's finally here. He gets his opportunity. I'm confident enough in saying that he's probably going to take it, and he has a real good chance of stealing the show here on Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I don't think it's any secret that, Paddy's my boy. I've been watching his fights for a long time. I remember Paddy as a 15-year-old kid on the Cage Warriors forums, just winding people up, calling blokes out, saying that he was the best bantamweight in the country and who wanted to fight him. Like a 15-year-old kid, man, absolutely insane. To see his career and progression throughout Cage Warriors and now to the UFC has been phenomenal. He got the offer from UFC a few years back and opted to stay in Cage Warriors for a while. Got some invaluable experience with those losses against Nad Narimani and Soren Bak. I think he learned a hell of a lot from those. Obviously, made a nice chunk of change in those fights as well, selling out the Echo Arena. And I think it's all set him up, to be in the perfect position now, career-wise, to start moving up the UFC rankings. Watching his debut fight, I'm not going to lie, I was pulling my hair out. I got a couple more grey hairs and pretty much nearly flipped off my furniture in the living room over when he got that knockout win. It was a real roller coaster of a fight, and I think Paddy's a guy who the confidence with him is off the charts in all walks of life, and especially fighting. And I think he got caught up in the moment a little bit in that first fight, and maybe took a few shots that he shouldn't have taken. So hopefully he's kind of got those pre-fight nerves out now. Look, one thing we do know about Paddy in terms of this is going to be the first, fight in the arena the size of the O2, but he loves that. He soaks that up. So I'm not expecting this to be, any kind of detriment to him coming out in front of a crowd which is going to be overwhelmingly partisan towards him. I think he's going to suck it up. I think when that walkout hits, the place is going to go absolutely insane. Paddy's going to feed off that energy and put on a solid performance.
Yeah, speaking of that walkout, Andy, you tweeted something, I think it was yesterday, about Paddy's walkout. There you go.
Apologies.
It's going to be electric, Andy, isn't it?
It's going to be incredible. Like it's been incredible since he was a 21-year-old selling out the Echo Arena, as Brad will wax lyrical about all day, and it's something special. It's one of my favorite walkouts in all of MMA. It really, like, what he can do with the crowd and from such a young age has been phenomenal. He's been a star on the regional scene for 5, 6, 7, 8 years now, and now he's finally on that world level, and he's transcending immaculately from that regional level to the world level. It's crazy, and I really think if the UFC can get this right, they have to get this right, then it can literally blow the roof off. It's already been blown off recently, but it can blow the roof off the O2 again. I cannot wait to watch. This is the must. If you're going to watch anything of this card, it's outside the fighting, it has to be Paddy Pimblett's walkout. There's nothing better.
Yeah, indeed. I'm sure you'll get the blackout treatment and as that song hits on Saturday night. Looking at his opponent, Harry, I think Rodrigo Vargas is a definite winnable fight for Paddy Pimblett tonight. I look at, and that's putting it kindly. I looked at his fight with Ruzong, and I think he's very lethargic on the feet. Has a good calf kick. Is tough as nails. But very slow on the feet, no head movement. Paddy might even have a chance of winning a striking exchange against this guy, but we definitely know if the fight hits the ground, it probably will be advantage to Paddy Pimblett on Saturday night. What are your thoughts?
Look, your man's trash. Let's not cut any fucking corners here, right? Your man's trash. Like, I've written in my notes about 3 paragraphs. Berger Nicholson? No is the answer. No, sir. Look, he's slow. He throws everything with power. He keeps everything on the center line. His chin's high. He doesn't cut any angles. He's got a bit of power. But when he drives off combinations, I mean, his hips are just there for the taking, right? Paddy is going to be the far bigger man, the more athletic man, quicker, more durable. And yeah, as you say, when it hits the ground, it's going to be a long night. I mean, in one time, like, Zhurong didn't really paint himself in the greatest of lights in that fight either. He got drawn into that fight. But there was a moment where Zhurong had his back taken, and Vargas goes for the rolling back take and just face plants on the floor. And I mean, like, if I need to say anything else about his grappling, it's that. You know what I mean? This is a layup fight for Paddy. We're going to see the walkout. He's going to go out there, and I'd be very surprised if Vargas makes it out of round 1.
Indeed. What are your opinions on the fight, Sean, Denny? Do you think that this is going to be a certain walk in the park for Paddy? Do you think he might have to get over a couple of hurdles, perhaps against someone as tough as Vargas. You know, he's a guy that can take a slap, that's for sure. But how long he can do it for, or do you think, you know, will Paddy look to try and take it down as quickly as possible?
Yeah, my notes are actually shorter than Harry's. Mine just says tee up. So I think Paddy has fought a lot more dynamic people than this. Like, I actually think this fight sort of lends itself to Paddy doing something spectacular. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see him dust off a flying triangle or something like that. This guy is pretty static. He can get caught in it. So I think Paddy is going to. This is set up for a highlight reel finish, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that flying triangle.
Indeed. Spencer, I'm going to go to you last about Paddy Pimblett in particular. You know, looking from your perspective, how big of a star do you think Paddy can be? He's already made a wave after just one fight in the UFC. But more importantly, how far do you think he can get up the rankings? How good of a fighter do you think he is? And what way should the UFC handle Paddy Pimblett in the lightweight division?
So I'm going to go with the middle one there first. And it's that I don't know. I don't know how far Paddy Pimblett can go. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing going forward after this one. I like that we're continuing our weekly tradition of letting Harry just absolutely light up the opponent of the guy the UFC is clearly trying to set up for a big win. Did it last week with Bruno Silva, did it again here, obviously with Rodrigo Vargas getting Paddy. He's clearly a star. There's a magnetism to this kid. You guys all have greater experience with him in terms of those Cage Warriors walkouts and things of that nature. But you see going into that debut, the energy that followed him, the attention that followed him from people that probably didn't know who he was to begin with. And just the way the UFC promoted him going into it drew eyeballs. He's now connected with Barstool Sports, for better or for worse, regardless of what you think of them. They are a massive entity here in North America. And so I know Robbie Fox is over in London. Rob's a good kid. They're putting out content together all week. He has the potential to be a really tremendous star and a tremendous kind of rising star for them going forward. But it goes to what Andy says of the UFC has to get this right. They'll get it right on Saturday in terms of the walkout. They've gotten it right with the opponent because there was a very brief period of time where it was maybe going to be Jared Gordon, and that was going to be a huge test for Paddy, just in terms of an experienced guy like Jared. It'll be right on Saturday. The question is, for me, is going to be, can they continue to get it right to build him the momentum to where he gets comfortable, to where he loses, so to where he gets rid of some of that erraticness that Brad spoke about with that first fight, where he is caught up in the moment, where he is trying to put on a show. Because as great as it has been, there comes a point in time where the showmanship has to take a backseat to, I have to go out and win this fight against this guy who is top quality. We haven't seen it yet. It'll be a couple more fights in the UFC before we get to that point. But on the way there, he's going to be an absolutely gigantic star.
100%. Very well said. And I think that we've said just about enough on that fight as we move along to the next one on the card. And man, they just keep coming and coming and coming on this card. The return of Gunnar Nelson. I mean, I cannot wait to see this. You know, Gunnar has been out of the game now for a couple of years, back injuries, like stop-start, pandemic. We haven't seen him inside the octagon since the Gilbert Burns loss in 2019. He hasn't won a UFC fight since 2018 against Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Andy, I'm going to go to you first. What Gunnar Nelson do you expect to see on Saturday night after so long out of the cage?
I haven't a clue. To be honest, I'm not going to pretend that I do, because I don't. I'm glad, I guess, that it's kind of mad to see, you know, I can't even remember who he's fighting. Takashi Soto, is that his name?
That's right.
Sato, apologies. To go from fighting Leon Edwards to Gilbert Burns to Takashi Sato, it's a big drop off. So I think it's probably appropriate in that we haven't seen Gunnar Nelson. I know I think he spoke to Ariel Helwani. He said he had some really bad injuries and stuff the last while. But yeah, I mean, it's just good to see him back, I guess, and to see it's kind of a litmus test, I suppose, for us to reevaluate and say, okay, Gunnar Nelson is back, but what version of Gunnar Nelson is back, to what level is Gunnar Nelson back. And, you know, there was a lot of hype at one point in the UFC around Gunnar Nelson as this fantastic grappler, which he is, but it never really translated to the wins that maybe we expected of him. So it's time for now to reevaluate and, you know, I guess to regroup and for Gunnar Nelson to have another go. And then I guess we'll see, because we've seen kind of fighters come back after layoffs and we don't really know where they are. So he kind of has to reinvent himself a little bit. Also in the sense that the division that he's in, it's dominated by wrestlers. And while he may have fantastic jiu-jitsu, that hasn't proved to be the dominant skill set lately. So yeah, I'm just excited again to see him back, but I've no idea what to expect.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. I think it's the correct opponent for him. Obviously, he was supposed to fight Claudio Silva. Silva had to pull out. Sato's come in at short notice, which I think is probably more of a favorable fight for Gunnar Nelson. Obviously, Sato, you know, has some judo skills, is powerful on the feet as well. But I would fancy my chances with Gunnar Nelson taking this fight out and getting Sato out of there pretty quickly. Sean, Denny, what's your opinions on the fight? And are you excited to see Gunnar Nelson come back? What are you expecting to see?
Yeah, I can't wait. Like Gunny can be a bit tentative at times and doesn't push where he needs to get the fight to. Like he'll stand in his karate stance. He'll be decent enough in the striking, but sometimes he lacks a bit of urgency to try and get the takedown. But that's the beauty of fighting a judoka. If you can't take him down, give him a head and arm throw or something, and he'll take you down. And that's a way that Gunny can then get the back, submit him, rear naked choke. It's a very favourable matchup here, I think. I think he'll be okay on the feet, but I just hope he brings in the urgency that he's been missing, gets that unbelievable black belt jiu-jitsu working to his advantage, and getting out of there within the first probably say two rounds maximum. If it goes longer than that, I'd be a little bit disappointed. And then get back in there quick after, get the win, get on a card in a couple of months, and get active.
Indeed, Harry. I know you're a big jiu-jitsu guy, actively training in jiu-jitsu right now. Talk to me about Gunnar Nelson's jiu-jitsu here in this fight against Sato. I mean, Sato is a guy who went in there and lost by arm triangle against Miguel Baeza in his last fight. He's going to have his hands full here in the jiu-jitsu department as well on Saturday night.
For sure. I mean, if it gets to the ground, I think it's done. You know, Baeza had hurt Sato a little, caught him with a few clean shots. But as soon as Baeza took a naked shot from miles out, Sato eventually gets the turtle. Baeza takes his back, goes palm to palm. As Sato ducks out, he immediately just transitions for the head and arm, and it's done. It's done immediately. There's no answer the telephone. There's no attempt to give his back up. There's nothing. He just taps. It's done. So in terms of if Gunny gets it to the ground, I think it's even quicker than that. You know, like Gunny is. I actually met Gunnar this evening, which is hella strange. I went to the changing room, and this fella came out of the changing room, and I was like, "Fuck me, that's Gunnar Nelson." You know, look. The thing I have a problem with in this fight, if I can just go a little longer, is Sato and Gunny have similar styles in that they're a little bit slower, they're a little bit more calculated, but Sato has an incredibly obvious tell when he's going to throw strikes. He goes from that in and out bouncy style, and then he stops. And when he stops, he takes another bounce, and then he throws. If Gunny can time that and read that, if someone as stupid as me can time and read that, Gunny's going to be able to do it as well, right? And if that happens, we're going to find Gunny either timing takedowns or timing strikes. If I'm Sato, though, I'm beating up that front leg of Gunny because he leaves it so wide. And if that happens, we may see Gunny force the takedown. And if that happens, it's done. It's done.
Brad, Gunnar Nelson has obviously spent his majority of his camp in SevereMMA, his gym over in Iceland, spent some time over with SBG as well. Do you think he has, you know, would he be at a disadvantage in comparison to his last UFC run with maybe some of the bodies that he's with now? You know, obviously came up with likes of Conor McGregor, some really good guys at SBG. I'm not too familiar with Mullen or MMA or what guys are coming out of. Maybe I'm not sure if you are either, but how do you see that coming into this fight? You think that there'll be somewhat nerves or, as they call it, ring rust or cage rust coming into this fight?
Well, the deal with Mjolnir is, they are, closely tied to SBG. There's a lot of cross training going on between those gyms. There always has been. I remember speaking to Connor back when I believe it was just after he left Cage Warriors, and he'd just been over to Mjolnir training ahead of his UFC debut, and they had him eating sheep's head and all that kind of crazy stuff. So those two gyms have always had like a really good working relationship, and there's high level guys in both places. So I'm sure Gunny's been getting the work in. One thing I will say about in terms of like the rust and whatever coming back for Gunny is he got a huge reception last time we fought in London. He was fought in the UK and the Irish regional scene quite a lot. So in this part of the world, we've always kind of accepted him as one of our own. Now, last time he was fighting Leon Edwards, and the reaction that Leon got in the arena was just atrocious. I've never heard an English fighter get booed that much since the Michael Bisping Matt Hamill decision, which obviously a lot of people didn't agree with. And Bisping at the time was like the most popular UK guy, probably of all time still. But he got roundly booed after that Matt Hamill decision, and this kind of reminded me of the reaction that Leon got last time. Now, I think Leon had maybe said he'd spoken out about Masvidal in the week and said some like pretty unkind things, and I think maybe that was part of it. But there was also a lot of love for Gunnar Nelson in that building. So I think it's an intangible. Obviously, it's not something that has a physical effect on a fight, but I think when he walks out into the O2, by the time he's fighting, it's going to be absolutely packed out, and he's going to get a very warm welcome. And I think he's going to feel very at home very quickly, and that can only help him going into this one.
Indeed. Spencer, Takeshi Sato, do you think he can offer Gunnar Nelson anything in this fight? Do you think he can cause him problems in any areas? And what's your overall opinion on Gunnar Nelson as a whole, as a fighter?
I think Sato can, outside of the inevitable puncher's chance, there's skills that he has. As he said, he can beat up that lead leg. He can, he does have some power. We saw him put Ben Saunders down, and it's a late career Ben Saunders, but still, when you have that kind of power, both in your kicks and in your punches, land something. Gunny's been out for a number of years. Maybe the timing isn't there. Anything can happen in that regard. I think Andy really hit on the thing for Gunnar for me is that, there was all that hype. There was all that attention. He was sort of praised and projected as a contender before he was asked to do anything, before he was asked to beat any of these guys. And then when he got in there with some of the fighters that you need to beat to get there, he couldn't get there. And I'm really interested to see this weekend just sort of what version of Gunny we get, where he's at. He's never been a guy that's going to do a ton of media, say a lot of stuff. And so I want to see is this Gunny coming back to make a run at a title, try to get to where he didn't get the first time around? Or is this just a guy that wants to get back on the mats and get back on the canvas and compete again because he's been forced to be out? I actually think we can get a better version of Gunnar Nelson if it's that second guy, if he's not caught up kind of in that parallel wave with Conor and SBG when it was on the rise, and can just go out and be the Gunnar Nelson that he is, that, got him to the UFC in the first place.
Indeed. It's going to be very interesting to see how that fight unfolds, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing Gunnar Nelson back in action, back where he belongs inside the UFC octagon. As we move along to the opening fight on the main card, and that's another lovable rogue, Molly McCann, as she faces Luana Carolina in the flyweight division. Molly got a really good win in her last fight against Ji Yoon Kim. Brad, you seen how much it meant to her. She snapped 2 fight losing streaks. She really had her back against the wall. A really phenomenal person, phenomenal fighter. This is going to be a good fight, and it's the perfect fight, I think, to kick off the main card on Saturday night.
Yeah, Molly's been a friend of mine for a long time. I called her fights back amateur. One of her early pro fights where she won the title on Shokanor, and it was very soon after the loss of her stepfather, and had to interview her in the cage afterwards. And I was genuinely nearly shedding a tear myself. It was such an emotional moment. But that's Molly. She wears her heart on her sleeve, and she fights with her heart on her sleeve. We saw that last time. She was able to, just dig deep and channel that pure emotion into a performance that, probably kind of, I don't want to say saved her UFC career, but she was in a spot last time where she needed a big win. And she was able to, the old cliche of biting down on the gum shield and going out there and taking it. And I know she's in a very good position now. She's got a new UFC contract. She's, feeling very well looked after. She's in a great place personally. And I'm expecting nothing but big things. She's always deserved this. She, seeing her headline Cage Warriors in the Echo was wonderful. But, this is a woman that deserves to fight in front of 20,000 screaming English fans. And I'm so happy for her. And I can't wait to see her go to work on Saturday.
You're on mute, Ian.
Excuse me. Yeah, you couldn't have said it any better. Harry, just give us a quick breakdown on this fight before we move on. Obviously, we're running up on time here, and we've got to get through a few more fights. But how do you see this fight going down? What can you tell us and the breakdown of this fight?
We've got 15 minutes of war. We've got 15 minutes of grit. And if you're in the trenches against Molly McCann, you're going to fucking die. That's how this fight goes.
Absolutely unbelievable stuff there. Savage. And speaking of war, the first fight the first fight we'll talk about on the, I thought that was opening up the main card. It's actually Jai Herbert and Ilia Topuria that's opening up the good card. An equally as good fight in the lightweight division. Topuria coming in for his second fight this week against Jai Herbert after his first scrap with Paddy Pimblett in the hotel. Spencer, we spoke about Ilia Topuria on this show before. Brad was with us. Everyone, we've all kind of spoke about Ilia Topuria. Let's talk about Jai Herbert for a minute. This is another difficult matchup for him. Obviously, Topuria coming up from the featherweight division has been creating quite a storm in the featherweight division. Herbert himself, he's had a tough run of it in the UFC so far, been matched up very difficultly. How do you see him matching up to Topuria in this fight? I see, he will have the slight advantage on when it comes to the size and maybe the strength. I think I would like to see him use his length, keep Topuria at distance, make it as difficult as possible for the Georgian. How do you see this fight going down?
Exactly what you said. Just be the bigger, longer, taller guy. Keep him on the end of those jabs and those kicks. It's been an absolutely rugged slate for Jai Herbert to start his UFC career. And it didn't go well to start his UFC career. He got a very good win last time out. And I think everybody saw the reaction video of his misses, just absolutely losing it when he did get that victory, which was great to see. But this is another just rugged assignment. I mean, Ilia Topuria, I think, should still be a featherweight. I hope he can get that kind of sorted out, because size-wise, he doesn't necessarily feel like a guy to me that's going to excel in this division. Now, maybe we'll see. We'll find out on Saturday. We'll get a first good read of where he could possibly fit at 55. But if I'm Jai Herbert, I'd stick the jab, throw those low kicks, but get everything back quickly, because Ilia Topuria will be looking to grab a leg and put you on the ground, or looking to get under one of those shots and get around your waist. And from there, how tall you are doesn't matter. And he's an absolute menace on the canvas.
Yeah, indeed. Andy, you spoke today about, what has Jai Herbert done to the matchmakers. Do you feel that he's been unfairly matched at his UFC, at the start of his UFC career?
I mean, I don't know if it's unfairly, but he's certainly had a much tougher test in his initial run with the promotion than some other fighters. That's indisputable. Going in against Francisco Trinaldo in your debut is a tough task for anyone. And let's be fair to Jai here. He was lighting Trinaldo up for the vast majority of that fight until he got clipped. Ilia Topuria is an absolute killer, but Jai Herbert can be an absolute killer too. We've seen him on the regional scene put away guys like Joe McColgan, one punch. So this is a banger. This is an absolute banger. You have to tune into this fight, because it's going to be one of the best fights on the card. it is one of those ones where, from a UK fighter perspective, a little bit worried. But at the same time, I could totally see Jai Herbert going out here and putting Topuria away, which would be a humongous statement. Albeit Topuria is up a weight class, a lot of people are very high on him. So if he was to come out and make a statement like that, that could really kickstart a run up the rankings.
Indeed. I mean, my counter argument to the matchups of Jai Herbert is his age. I mean, he's what is he now? 33, he's 33 right now. I mean, we don't really have too much time for Jai Herbert to kind of slow roll him into the UFC. In my opinion, it's make or break for Jai Herbert right now. But Jesus, I do agree. Tough matchups, but he has to do it. He has to prove it to himself. He has to prove it to everybody that he is good enough to go in there and hang with these guys. A fantastic fighter overall. Sean, Denny, what are your thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, Topuria is very, very good. Like he has lovely striking, but he's a very high level BJJ black belt, very high level. And his wrestling is wrestling as well. Like he's got the caucus wrestling down pat as well. Like he's got a bit of everything. So I think Jai has to use his size. And he has to show why everybody calls him the West Country banger. Like he has to go and make this dirty. He needs to try and get Topuria with his hands down, and he needs to hit him with one of his big shots. Use that size to the advantage. Don't get too close because Topuria will take you down, but use the size, knock him out, get out of there as quick as possible, and on to the next one.
Indeed. Harry, your thoughts on this fight? How do you see it going down, and who do you fancy to take the win on Saturday night or Saturday afternoon, wherever you're watching, or Saturday morning?
I'm going to pick Ilir Topuria. Something that I speak about often on this podcast is that my opinion will always go towards the fighter that's more well-rounded and that has more tools and is well able to take the fight where they want it to go. Jai Herbert is absolutely a banger on the feet, but Ilir Topuria is the truth. And you don't go in there against Ryan Hall. And okay, Ryan Hall's got a very strange style, a very odd style, but you don't go in there and deal with Ryan Hall like you do if you aren't an elite level fighter. Full stop. Not grappler, fighter. The Damon Jackson performance was incredible. And I'm pretty high on Yusuf Zalal, and that was a shutout too. I think Ilir Topuria is absolutely a phenomenal fighter. I think Spencer raises a great point about 55. 45 to 55, specifically in the UFC, is a huge jump, a big old jump. So there's a very interesting wrinkle and a very interesting storyline there. But everything that the guys have mentioned is Jai being a little bit longer and having power. I mean, how many fighters have we talked about having a little bit of length and a little bit of power and still getting taken out? I do think, and I will say, regardless of age, this is unprecedented ruthlessness when it comes to matchmaking. And I don't understand it. I really don't. I get it. 33, you have to push the man. He has to be tested. But this sort of test seems just unrealistically insane to me. But look, this is the fight game, I guess.
Well, to counter-argue that a little bit, I mean, if he goes in there and gets the win against one of the top-ranked featherweights out there, he'll get himself.
You're right.
He'll get himself up there with he has to be looking for a ranked opponent in the lightweight division. Like, he can't be hanging around or waiting around here. But it's a double-edged sword. Whatever. I don't know. It is difficult for him, but it's make or break for Jai. Look, we'll pick and choose a little bit on the undercard here. The next fight I would like to talk about is that Jack Shore versus Timur Valiev in the bantamweight division. This is a serious. This could be on the main card of any main card of any card. To be honest, this is a serious fight. Jack Shore undefeated of 15-0. One of the most underrated fighters in the UFC now as well. And this is really his coming out party. But in his defense, he's coming in against a really tough guy here against Valiev too, and a guy that a lot of people might not realize how good he is either. So it's like, if he goes out there and puts on a dominating performance and win a decision, maybe he might not get the credit that he deserves yet, because Valiev doesn't have that name yet. Brad, talk to me about Jack Shore as a fighter. You know, you've had the chance to see him compete live many a times. Would you agree with my sentiment that he is a massively, massively underrated fighter?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm starting to feel like a real broken record, but again, you know, I've called Jack Shore's fights. I think I called all of his professional fights up until he joined the UFC, and a couple of his amateur ones as well. And again, you know, being able to see that progression has just been astounding. And again, you know, he's another lad who has grown up in a fighting family. His dad, Shaky Shore, BJJ black belt himself for many, many years, and also an MMA fighter back in the real Wild West days of the UK MMA scene. Shaky had a few scraps back in the day, so Jack's kind of grown up with it, and you know, grown up around that Abertillery combat team, which is now Shore MMA. The guy's skill set's undeniable. You know, there were always used to be the comparisons in Cage Warriors to you know, a young Welsh GSP. And in terms of his sporting mindset and his fitness and his ability to game plan for certain opponents, you can certainly see where that comparison is drawn. I think, you know, he is the polar opposite of a Paddy Pimblett in terms of the personality side of things. Jack just wants to go and train and go and fight and then go and train again for the next fight. You know, he's not out there, you know, making a name for himself in terms of like trying to be famous or trying to be a star. But that's a dangerous man. You know, he's not having to worry about how many followers he's got on Instagram. He's just worrying about beating people up. And when you've been doing it as long as Jack has, at the level that he has, that's a terrifying prospect. But, you know, Timur Valiev, you could say pretty much the same thing about this guy. This guy is a thoroughly unpleasant dude to fight. So very much looking forward to it. I mean, this for me is one of the closest calls on the entire card. You know, if you had a gun to my head, I still wouldn't be able to give you an answer on who I think is going to win this fight.
Yeah, indeed. I'm in a similar boat myself. Spencer, talk to me about Timur Valiev as a fighter on an 8-fight win streak at the minute. Absolutely no joke as this Russian fighter.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that if you talked to coaches and you talked to some of the training partners that he's been with over the years, he was always the guy that they were giving you the like, wait till you see. And look, we've all talked to coaches and fighters, and you know, sometimes you can tell when they're just gassing up their guy and they just want to get their guy a shout, and then you can tell when they're being serious and the guy is a real problem. And Timur Valiev has always been one of those real problem kind of guys. Had the fight in his debut against Trevin Jones, nearly puts Trevin Jones out in the first round. Things go sideways in the second. Doesn't go his way, ends up being a no contest because Trevin Jones took the fight on 5 days' notice, didn't know he was going to fight in the UFC, smoked some weed beforehand. It is what it is. When you go out and have a performance like he had against Raoni Barcelos, who is of major quality, right? Earlier this year, everybody gets super high on Victor Henry because he goes out and has that performance against Raoni Barcelos. Timur Valiev had that same performance and did those same things and looked equally as good, and is one of those guys similar to Jack Shore that just because of the churn in this division, because the talent level is so rich, because there's 2 or 3 fights, it seems, every week in this division, we kind of just forget about them. And he is absolutely, as Brad said, no joke, an absolute handful. And I cannot wait for this fight.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait for this. This is one of the fights of the undercard. One of many great fights on the undercard, actually. And moving quickly along, I'll go to you, Harry, and I'd like you just to talk about Nikita Krylov versus Paul Craig. Paul Craig, a guy who has taken out one of the two of the top prospects in the light heavyweight division right now, that with Jamal Hill and also with Ankalaev as well, who fought last weekend. You know, we kind of look over Paul Craig and you know, it wasn't going all of his way against Ankalaev. He pulled off that at the last minute decision, but he comprehensively beat Jamal Hill, who has been looking great in recent fights. What's your opinion on this fight, and how do you see Paul Craig getting along in it?
I think it's an interesting one. I really do think it's an interesting one. I think we know where Paul Craig's specialism lies, right? And I think it could have even been Sean Sheehan, but somebody said, like, if you allow Paul Craig to make grips and pull you into his guard, you're going to get submitted. Something's going to happen, and it's not going to be great for you. And with Krylov, you know, Krylov is a big man. He hits hard. He's got good striking. He's got good wrestling himself. He can hang on the ground, right? But look, I am really interested to see what Paul Craig looks like on the feet here. In the last 3 or 4 fights, he's seemingly putting it together a little bit better. He's seemingly understanding the fight game a little. I think the really interesting thing about Paul Craig is the mentality. When he first came in, and maybe I'm wrong, he can correct me if I am, but it felt like he was kind of here for a good time. He was like, I made it to the UFC, I'm going to have some fights, and I'm going to see what happens. And I think he's now understood and realized that, no, actually, he is this level. He actually is a UFC level caliber fighter, and he deserves to be here. And I think that mentality switch has allowed him to grow and evolve and become the more well-rounded fighter that we're seeing. Obviously, he trains at a smaller camp, and he has a camp that's dedicated basically to himself. So I'm really interested to see how he comes in, because Krylov is a well-rounded fighter, and he's going to test Paul Craig everywhere.
Indeed, yes. Good breakdown, Harry. Another fighter that's opening up the main card is someone that you spoke to, Andy, previously, and that's Mohammad Mahayev, one of the top prospects in the world of MMA right now. Undefeated at 5-0, 22-0, I believe, as an amateur, multi-time IMAF world champion. How special of a talent is he?
Mohammad Mahayev is a special talent in many ways. One, for his fighting, obviously. Like, this guy was the worldwide prospect at amateur. He was the undisputable, the best amateur in the world, and unanimously, that was the agreement. He's come in and he's 5-6-0, depending on which site you look at and which bout is classified as exhibition or a real one. But he's undefeated and he's going through guys, and he's long shown his wrestling capabilities, his grappling capabilities, but where he was a little bit green was in his striking. And in his most recent fight against Blaine O'Driscoll, who was a talented striker in his own right, he really, really showed the development of his game. That was as far as his competition level at the pros, he was fighting, some of them were cans, some of them were journeymen, and then sprinkled in, a decent fighter in here or there. But then once he got to Blaine O'Driscoll, this was a legitimate test against the most experienced pro that he'd faced to date, and he handled it with I wouldn't say with ease, because Blaine gave him a good go, but he came through that challenge and he finished him in the second round. So that kind of was all I needed to see before wanting to see Mo in the UFC. And now, he's 21 years old. He's still so young, so I'd like to see them slow roll him, because he still has a lot of development to go. But this guy is just like, he could be such a special talent, and not only because of his fighting capabilities, but also because of his story. I mean, he was smuggled into the UK, fleeing he grew up in Dagestan, fleeing Russia, and he got signed to the UFC there a few months ago, and now he finally gets his British passport. So it's a real success story in many ways. And yeah, like, he's a special talent, and I think, to be honest, he'll go through Cody Durden with relative ease here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Andy. It was very well said there. And I'd like to go to Spencer. I'm wondering, Spencer, have you seen much of Mohammad Mahayev before his debut in the UFC? And what are your thoughts on him as a fighter overall?
So I'm a lunatic, so I've seen plenty of him, because I hear enough people talk about these guys as they're coming up, and you go, all right, let me find out about this. And,
student of the game.
I write the fight-by-fight preview for the UFC website, and so it's my responsibility, I feel, to know things about these people instead of just, pulling little factoids here and there and seeing some of their fights. And as Andy said, he was the prospect of prospects. Like, it wasn't a debate. There was no questions. It wasn't who are the 3 or 4 or 5. It was Mohammad Mahayev and then everybody else. And so when you're that guy and you're now 21 and you're undefeated as a pro, as I've said earlier, and it applies to Jack Shore as well, when you pile up winning streaks of this level, of this quality, like, you don't get to this point, regardless of who you're fighting, in a sport where you could slip on a banana peel at any time, unless you are uber talented. And this kid is absolutely uber talented. And he mentioned he'd like to see them slow roll Mohammad Mahayev. I would as well. Unfortunately for he and I and anybody else that wants that path for him, the kid doesn't want it at all. Like, he sought out this Cody Durden fight when Cody Durden had some things to say about Ricky Lang after that win. He has said in the lead to this, I want to smash this dude so that I can get a top 15 guy. And then after I get that top 15 guy, I want a top 10 guy, and I want to beat John Jones's record. He's got 2.5 years to get there. I don't know if he does or not. Somebody asked him today, does it put pressure on you? And he's like, why? If I don't get there, what? Okay, if I don't get there in 2023, I'll get there in 2024. I love the mindset. He is absolutely the real deal. He is going to smash this dude on Saturday to kick off this show. We get a card. I'm in Canada, and I know that it's cool that this card is bookended by guys from Wigan. I asked Tom Aspinall about it. Unfortunately, Tom doesn't really pay attention to narratives or any of that stuff. Couldn't care less and was just like, yeah, I guess it's cool. And yep, known him since he was 12, but doesn't matter to me, but it'll be fun for you to write. It is fun for me to write, Tom. It is interesting to me. It's going to be cool. It's a great way to start and end this show. Like, I can't wait. You guys are so lucky.
We are indeed. I can't wait for that too. Brad, just give me your thoughts on Mohammad Mahayev. How fast, I think it's a no-brainer that we all think that he's going to steamroll Cody Durden on Saturday. I think within one round, we're going to see Mohammad Mahayev get his hand raised, no doubt in my mind. How quickly, Brad, do you think we can see him rise up the flyweight division?
Very quickly. I mean, it's not the deepest weight class in the UFC. And like everyone else has said, this kid is just ludicrously talented. You look back to his amateur career, his wins over Ryo Yamaguchi, beat him 3 times. And Ryo is like, the other uber prospect amateur. I remember walking into a show in 2015, I think it was, maybe 2016, and seeing the name Mahayev on the card. And I was like, who's Mahayev? What's Mahayev doing fighting in Bolton? This is weird. And then the next thing you know, the fight starts and he suplexes this kid out of his boots. And you're like, oh, okay, that's what this guy's doing here. And look, that's what we've seen from him. Elite level wrestling, like not just good MMA wrestling, really, really good wrestling, represents England in wrestling internationally. This kid could have, if he wanted to, gone the Olympic route, and I have no doubt, he would have been able to medal at the Olympics if he wanted to stick with it. And as I say, flyweight, not the deepest division. Can he beat John Jones' record? I don't see why not. What I really want, though, I will just say quickly, what I really want, I know I've not been a good boy all my life, but if someone up there is listening, give me Jake Hadley versus Mohammad Mahayev. That is the fight I want to see.
Oh yes. Oh please do. The scroobiest amount of shit that would be talked before that fight would be ridiculous before they even throw any punches. I mean, whoo. Harry, talk to me about Mahayev's grappling. I mean, he's a really, like Brad said, he's wrestling mixed with his Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's a guy who really integrates them both very well into his game, super dominant, and it's going to give him massive success in this flyweight division, I think.
So I'm going to make a comparison, and this is purely when the octagon is locked and the fighters are in there. He reminds me of Colby Covington in that the grappling, when it starts, it's chain grappling, it's dominant grappling, and he always is ensuring that there are multiple dilemmas for you to deal with. Is it, I need a post? He's stripping your hand post. Is it that my hips are closed? Okay, well, I need to move my hips. Is it that I'm getting punched in the face? Is it that there's chokes being threatened? Is it that I'm getting cross-faced? Is it that I can't get my feet under me? The grappling level that he is able to put on guys at amateur level, at the regional scene, is just something that you're never going to have experienced until you're in it. And by that point, it's way too late. Way too late. So I think for Durden on Saturday, the same thing is going to happen. Yeah, he talks a bit of shit. Yeah, he's young. Yeah, he's this massive prospect. But you talk to him about that. You talk to him about the level of prospect he has. And he's like, but I've had it all my life. It's not really any different from me. And that is a huge fucking thing. So I suspect that he does steamroll him. I'm with Andy, actually. I'd like to see him slow rolled. I want to see this guy at 24, 25 getting his title shots, getting his positions. As Sean Sheehan has alluded to, we want the best fighters fighting the best guys when they are the best. There's no need to push him. He's 21. Allow the kid to rise, allow him to be at his full strength, and we're going to have an unbelievable fighter on our hands.
Absolutely. Sean, Denny, I'm sure you share the same excitement as all of us. We might as well round off with you waxing lyrical about Mohammad Mahayev.
Yeah, I think the way it's going to go is he's going to get Durden. Durden is going to be miserable on the ground. And just when Durden thinks that he's safe and he's getting out of it, that's when he's going to go out. That's when he's going to pounce. Just when he thinks he's safe, he's going to shut out that light.
Indeed, indeed. We've just about gone through all the fights on the main card. Spencer, I'm going to hit you up for the heavyweight contest, and that's Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Sergey Pavlovich. I always get that.
Easy for you to say.
I'm always like getting it in the mirror beforehand and then fuck it up when we're live. But talk to me about that heavyweight showdown between two Russians on the undercard.
I mean, we talked about Jai Herbert getting thrown in to the deep end in the lightweight division. Sergey Pavlovich's debut came against Alistair Overeem. It came in Shanghai, China, like just rolled out into, like just lamb to the slaughter. Poor, I think he was 25 at the time. Like, just here you go, young fella. Alistair's coming off some losses. We just need to get him right. You're just here to get mauled, and he got mauled. But since then, he's looked good. He's got 2 good wins, 2 first-round finishes. Granted, it's over guys that are now no longer in the UFC, and Marcelo Gome and Maurice Green. But he's somebody that I've, COVID and everything that's been happening in the world for the last couple of years, and some injuries as well, have prevented him from fighting. But he's still in that younger, potentially emerging heavyweight group with the Tom Aspinalls, with Tai Tuivasa, with some other guys that are on the way up. And so this for me is a big test. Shamil Abdurakhimov is a tough test. The results haven't necessarily been there, but you look at the quality of fighter that he's faced, you look at who he's been in there with, and it lets you know a little something about kind of where the UFC sees him. And so I want to see if after a couple years off, what we get from a guy that's shown a little bit of something against overmatched opponents. What can Pavlovich do on Saturday against the guy that, rankings be damned, is just more experienced than him, has a little bit more wherewithal to him? Can he go out there and have a great performance? And if he does that put him in that group? Maybe not with Tom Aspinall, but with a Chris Dawkins and with some of these other guys that are starting to work their way up the divisional ladder.
Indeed. As the great Bossman says, the loser leave town match between Mike Grundy and Makwan Amirkhani. 2 guys are desperately in need of a win, Harry. I'll
just to jump in there. I'll come clean. That was me thinking it was my own account. I was going to post that on.
Nice one.
These comments do not represent Graham McDonald's views.
Oh, that's funny. Harry, talk to me about Mike Grundy and Makwan Amirkhani. How do you see that fight going down? 2 guys are desperately in need of a win. 2 really good grapplers. So does that mean we're going to see a striking battle here in this fight?
I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Like the thing. So first of all, 2 very different styles of grappling, right? Mike Grundy is that Olympic style, that Commonwealth style, that very grindy, aggressive, in your face, grind you down, wear you out style. Makwan is much more flashy, big suplexes, big trips, big high explosive movements. And that's really not paid dividends for him in other fights. He's gassed in fights. John Kavanagh's been in there talking about his family, his country, and all of these things to G him up. And look, he's lost against some excellent fighters and some guys that have worked his body and really sapped that gas tank. But if I'm Mike Grundy, I mean, I think really I'm going to have to test that gas tank again, right? If I can grind him, if I can make him hit big switches and do massive stand-ups and mat return him again and get into these scrambles and these positional changes that are going to really force Makwan to work, I mean, we have to go from what historical facts are, and that is that he gasses and Mike Grundy gasses less. So if I'm Grundy, however I put the pace on him, I'm going to put the pace on him. Makwan has an incredible first round, a phenomenal first round. So if I'm Grundy, I'm wearing him down. I'm making sure I'm in that first round. I'm in his face, and I'm allowing him to use that energy, and then I'm going to capitalize.
Harry, do you think the level of competition that both fighters have fought recently might stand? Like I'm looking at Amirkhani, who has been fighting kind of upper echelon guys. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, but you're dead right. The pace will win this fight, and whoever lasts that pace will probably win this fight. Brad, I'm going to leave it over to you just to kind of round us off. This is the last fight we'll probably speak about. Obviously, Nathaniel Wood's fight has fallen through. Just before we got on here, there's been no news on that. Morales was forced to pull out of that fight. Maybe we can move to Brad here now, as he might have an update on that.
Don't be surprised if Davey Grant jumps in last minute. He has told the UFC that he is ready. He's able to get down to a reasonable weight, so we could see Davey Grant versus Nathaniel Wood.
Let's fucking go! Let's fucking go!
The great Brad Wharton, the breaker of news here on the UFC preview show. My goodness. Oh, I wish I had said that last before I talked to you about Corey McKenna. But that's who I was originally going to go to you about, Brad. An exceptional talent is Corey McKenna, and someone who I'm really excited to see progress inside the UFC.
Yeah, absolutely. Corey is super, super talented. She's had the luxury of training with some really, really good people on both sides of the Atlantic. She was training over in Wales, and she was training with Jack Mason's crew, BKK, while she was with Cage Warriors, and also started taking those trips over to Alpha Male, which is a permanent move now. I think it's a great move for her. It's a gym that's known for having a lot of sub 155 guys, and obviously a lot of very, very high level performers in those lower weight categories. So very much looking forward to seeing the leveling up that Corey McKenna's done. Of course, she's had a bit of time out. She had that injury she picked up in a previous fight, but she's had plenty of time to rehab that now. I guess the big question for me with Corey in this one is how she's going to react to this big crowd, big venue. She's still very young. And coming out, she's going to be one of the first hometown or home country rather fighters on the crowd. So it's going to be interesting to see how she deals with that, and if she deals with it well, it's going to be a good night for Corey.
Indeed. And just before we wrap it up, guys, a quick whip around to everybody. I want to get everyone's opinion on who they think the fight of the night is going to be, in their opinion. And Jesus, we have a tough pick between all the fights. So Harry is scratching his head. Maybe I'll go to Andy Stevenson first. What are your thoughts? Fight of the night, Andy, real quick.
So I would have said Nathaniel Wood versus Vince Morales, but I'll switch it, seeing as it's not happening anymore, to Jai Herbert and Ilia Topuria. I think that's the banger of the night.
Yep, indeed. Sean Denny.
I'd like to see Bisping get a walkout, number one. Number two, I think it's going to be Shore Valiev.
Shore and Valiev, good call. Spencer Kite. I know we didn't really get your undercard fight of the night because we kind of covered everything tonight. But if by all means,
this entire card,
yeah.
Sit down. I mean, this thing starts at 10 a.m. for me. Coffee, bacon, fisticuffs.
Not unlike a bit of violence.
3-piece and an omelet.
Yeah, love it. And fight of the night, I'm going Arnold Allen, Dan Hooker. I think Arnold probably going to try to stand a little bit when he probably shouldn't. We'll get messy to start, and then it'll just be great for 15 minutes.
Indeed. Brad, what fight are you most looking forward to? What fight do you see standing out the most on the night?
I suppose I'm most looking forward to Molly and Paddy just for personal reasons. I agree with Spencer, though. I think fight of the night is going to be Dan Hooker versus Arnold Allen. And I also think Jai Herbert versus Ilia Topuria has got potential to be a lot of fun. But hey, look, if Davey Grant jumps in there, this is a guy who's known for stealing the show, right? And he's certainly going to get a man who'll bite down and trade with him in Nathaniel Wood. So who knows, man? This card's just absolutely nuts. I can't wait to be in the O2 on Saturday.
Absolutely insane. If Davey Grant hops in, oh my goodness. Harry, what do you think, man? Round us off here. What do you think that your fight of the night is going to be?
Oh, you've changed the fucking game with that Davey Grant call out, haven't you? You know what I mean? Look, the sensible money for me is Arnold Allen and Dan Hooker. I think I'm absolutely right up there with the second place of Timur Valiev and Jack Shaw. I think the reason why I lean towards Hooker and Arnold Allen is because I think it's just going to be wild. Whereas I think with Valiev and Shaw, that's the most competitive matchup on this card. So for my personal reasons, I would go Valiev Shaw, but for everything else, I'll take the other. But if Big Breaking Brad has called that fight, and that's happening. Jesus Christ, lads, have we got a banger?
Unbelievable. You know, I honestly think, you know, Arnold Allen, Dan Hooker is a phenomenal fight, a phenomenal matchup. I think somehow, some way that we're not going to see a performance of the night bonus not going to Paddy Pimblett. I think he's setting himself up to steal the show. That fight can be exciting in some ways, but I think once Paddy Pimblett gets a hold of him, I think we might see something special from Paddy. I think it's all set up for that man to steal the show. And that rounds us off, guys. I mean, absolutely phenomenal night of fights. Thanks to everybody for listening tonight. Thanks to everybody for watching us shoot the shit about this card. Thanks for Brad for breaking news and joining us tonight, the breaker of news. Thanks to our sponsors, All Real Nutrition Bars. Head on over to eatallreal.com, enter the code word SevereMMA, and get yourself some delicious protein bars, the nicest bars on the market. Support Irish, support the lads over there. Thanks so much to Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell. Go follow him at AndyStee123, at MMA Brad, at Spencer Kite, and at Denny Rants, and myself at O'Neill MMA. Follow us all on Twitter. Thanks to everybody for listening tonight. We'll be back next Thursday at the regular time, and we'll be chatting about the next UFC card. But who cares about that card? It's all about this Saturday night. It's all about UFC London. Let's get it on. I can't fucking wait.